This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Taluki, and on today's episode, I am going to break down all of the 6 draft picks from the Lions class of 2021 and see where they're going to fit on this depth chart as well. And also, I will share my NFL draft experience. I was able to experience the draft in person on Thursday in Cleveland. I'll break that down for you, and it was a very, very exciting time, that is for sure. But hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. I'm very, very excited to break this draft down for you because it's the most exciting time of the NFL offseason, in my opinion, is the time of the NFL draft. And the draft, it's always fun, and I've always enjoyed it. That is for sure. Just wanted to make an announcement really fast, though, before I begin my little deep dive into the draft. I officially got an internship with the Lake County Captains, which is a single-A baseball team in Cleveland. So I'll be producing their games, and they're the single-A affiliate for the Indians. So I'll be producing their games for them on the radio broadcast. I'll be in the studio and all that. But I will still be doing the podcast and helping out the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. So really, really excited for that. But I'm very happy for this opportunity with the Captains and really hoping it leads to something good. So I'm excited, and the Captains, a good ball club. I started there a couple days ago, and a lot of great people associated with that team. That is for sure. All right, I want to get into the draft, and I want to start off with my experience. You know, I was able to get tickets through a friend. He was able to reserve some of the tickets. I think each person was able to receive or reserve 2 tickets, and he reserved one for me, and he said, "Noah, we're going to the draft on Thursday." And I said, absolutely. I mean, it's been a dream. Seriously, it's been a dream of mine to attend an NFL draft. I mean, I remember as a kid, 10, 11 years old, watching it in New York City, watching guys like Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, a lot of those guys get drafted at Radio City. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, what an electric atmosphere that must be in New York City and all that. And then the NFL started moving it to different cities. And I think it was Dallas one year, Chicago, Philadelphia, places like that. A couple years ago, I see it's coming to Cleveland, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at John Carroll, and I'm going to make sure I go downtown to see all this. And I actually went downtown on Tuesday last week to see the draft setup. And, I couldn't really get close to the stage a lot. I mean, they had that area all blocked off and everything. But there was a park that overlooks the lake that I was able to see the stage and all that. And they had some NFL helmets. There's some really, really big helmets there that you could take a picture with. So I took a picture, of course, right next to the Lions one. And you could see the stage. I mean, you were obviously really far away, but you could still see the stage in the stadium and all that. And actually, in the stadium, First Energy Stadium, it was actually a fan experience. So you could go in there and kick a field goal and all that. So that was interesting. But I'll get to that in a moment. So, anyways, to be honest, we got there maybe 30 minutes to an hour before the draft began. Somewhere in there, and we parked at the casino down there just for free parking, all that. It was kind of a long walk, but I thought it was interesting too because when we were walking there, the Terminal Tower is one of the tall skyscrapers downtown Cleveland, and they had every time a team made a pick, they would put the team's logo and shine it on the building with the NFL draft logo. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anybody downtown, I guess, could see that and say, hey, my team, this team's picking, that team's picking, So I thought that was interesting. I noticed that when I was walking in. So, I wanted to get there earlier, but, some of my friends, some of my buddies were kind of lagging along. So, we got there. And I will say, so right next to the stadium was where the stage was. And then, there's a science museum that's right next door to that. And then right next door to that is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've been there once, and that was actually a lot of fun to see. But basically, that whole area around the Science Center and the museum and the stage was all blocked off. So right where the intersection of where the stadium, the Science Center and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame meet, that's kind of where you entered. So I remember I entered, and first thing I saw was, all the team stuff. You could buy whatever you wanted, NFL draft, memorabilia, all that. But then they had these things where it was like a football uniform, like kind of like a statue of each guy or each player of each team, basically, like a replica of that. And then you were able to get your picture in that and all that. So that was just kind of like the family friendly zone, I guess. And then if you traveled a little bit further in, that's when you started to see, the distance of the stage and all that, and then you got to go inside the stadium. I mean, anybody could walk into the stadium if you had a general admission ticket. It was kind of a general admission. Now, I tried to get closer to the stage, but you had to have a special ticket and a special pass to get in the stage area. So it was kind of bad luck for me, because if you had a general admission ticket, there were a couple places where you could see the stage okay. But I wouldn't say that there was like a really, really good view of it. I mean, it was, they were free tickets. I mean, you have to pay for them. So I guess you get what you pay for, I guess, which was $0. But at least it gets you into the stadium. And I didn't actually go into the stadium. I was one of those guys that really wanted to watch the draft. And so I just decided to stay. I just decided to stay and try to see the stage as much as I could. I mean, there was a lot of people there. I don't know how many, but there was a lot of people and, all kinds of Browns fans. I will admit, not many Lions fans. I didn't see too many. I was one of the lone people, at least in the section where I was. But I decided to check it out a little bit. So before the draft, I was walking around, and there's this parking deck that kind of overlooked the lake and the stage. Not the same one that I was talking about earlier. This was a different one on kind of like closer to the lake, and it wasn't as high, but that's where actually they set up some of the TV broadcasts. So NFL Network and ESPN, I guess the main broadcasts for them, like Adam Schefter and all those guys, they were inside the stage area. So basically where you needed that special ticket. But then there were the secondary broadcasts, some of the other analysts, like the one I went on Thursday was Kurt Warner and Joel Klatt on the NFL Network, and I think Maria Taylor and a couple others. I think Chris Mortensen was there. That was the ESPN, so they had it on the other side of the parking decks, their stages. But it was interesting because I decided to kind of go up there and see what that was all about. And so there was all these people standing around, because if you looked on TV, you could see all the crowd of people that were around each of these stages for the secondary analysts, I guess. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to stand behind Kurt Warner and Joel Klatt and see what happens. So I actually had a couple people text me they could see me on TV. I mean, I was in the first row. I mean, literally, I was right up against the plexiglass. And so you can, if you go back in the archives, I guess you could see me when Joel Klatt and Kurt Warner are talking. But I will say, Joel Klatt's interesting. There was a lot of downtime, because they weren't on the air all the time. They weren't like the main broadcast. So they were watching. I know they had like a little TV screen set up where they could watch the broadcast and all that. And he was getting into it with some of the fans. Some of the fans were just really, really excited to see him, I guess. And they were doing all these kind of chants with him. And he was really getting into it with them. He was really egging them on, I guess. So Joel Klatt was interesting, that's for sure. But the top 10 picks, it was interesting because Joel Klatt, and we couldn't hear him. We couldn't hear anything that was going on because the plexiglass, it seemed like it was soundproof. So, or at least they could hear what we were shouting, but we couldn't really hear what they were saying. So, but the top 10 picks, he would kind of turn around and kind of mouth at us who the pick was. So it was interesting because I kind of knew the picks about 5-7 minutes before they were actually announced on TV. So, I kind of knew, and, one of the guys, I mean, I think he saw I was a Lions fan and kind of mouthed, Sewell at me. And that was when I started texting some people. I said, I don't want to ruin the pick necessarily, but, I did get some, quote unquote, inside information from Joel Klatt, I guess. But, I mean, all those picks are all pretty much, they pretty much know where all the picks are going to be in the top 10. After the top 10, it gets kind of interesting. But I did high-five Kurt Warner, actually. He stepped outside the podium or the stage area for a minute, and so I did get a high-five from Kurt Warner. I was trying to get a picture with them, but they weren't turning around. They just didn't want to turn around. They were mostly just centered on the camera, And Joel Klatt was turning around a lot, but Kurt Warner not as much. I would have loved to meet Kurt Warner. That would have been a good talk. But basically, when I saw the Lions pick at number 7, I was behind NFL Network. I mean, I couldn't really see the stage. I was kind of watching, on the stage they had, you could see screens of, different things that they were talking about, or because there was a lot of like entertainment in between the picks. There was a band playing, and Michael Irvin was doing all kinds of funny things, and Roger Goodell, I think, was down there with the fans. So it was definitely interesting to experience. And I'm glad I was able to go, especially for the first round. I know other people that went to the second and third rounds. I actually ran into a couple people I knew, so that was fun. But I will admit, the Lions, I was really, really surprised that Penei Sewell fell. And a couple weeks ago, I know I mentioned on the podcast, Penei Sewell is a guy that the Lions really should consider drafting. But then my mock draft at the beginning of last week, I just didn't think he was going to fall. I really thought the Bengals were going to take him and really try to stack their offensive line. And so when Sewell fell to number 7, my friend said, let's get Devonta Smith. And I thought, no. At this point, I was pro wide receiver for a little bit last week, but when I saw Sewell fall, I said, no. You have to get Sewell. You have to at this rate. I didn't think he would fall. And seeing the reaction videos from Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and all those guys, how excited they were. Some people were, kind of backlashed them a little bit, especially when they were texting me. They're like, well, what the heck's up with your franchise? And I said, no. You got to understand, this is their first draft as heads. First draft as general manager for Brad Holmes. First draft as a head coach for Dan Campbell. They're excited that they made their pick. Also, on top of that, I don't know if they expected Sewell to fall. And this was a guy that they had really wanted to, they were evaluating a lot, and they really wanted to put some time in him, and they really wanted him, I think. And the fact that he fell to them was something to be excited about. I have nothing wrong with them celebrating like that. Nothing. I think it's great. New culture here in Detroit. When was the last time you saw somebody that excited in a Lions draft room? It made me think, and I actually went back and watched some of the old draft videos from the Lions, when they made the first round picks. A couple years ago with TJ Hawkinson. It was almost like a funeral in there. I mean, not much excitement. I mean, there was a little bit here and there, but nobody was going crazy like these guys. I mean, it's definitely a very different vibe in Detroit now. And I know it's like an old broken record with all you guys. We've seen that. Nothing's ever worked. But at least in my fandom here, I mean, okay, you could say Jim Schwartz a little bit, here and there. But this is a different breed. This is a different type of cat right here with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. Very interesting, and I just love their reaction. But back to the Sewell pick. I mean, like I said, I was really surprised he fell. But I really like his story. It's interesting that he came from American Samoa, and then they moved to Utah when he was a little bit older in life, and went from St. George, Utah, so southwest Utah. But Samoa, American football is pretty big in Samoa. It's one of the territories of the United States, way out there in Polynesia, the Pacific Ocean. And I've seen documentaries on Samoa before and how big American football is over there. Those guys are there's a lot of passion for football there. And, there's been some Polynesian players in the NFL. One of them, Damaka Petko, was a Michigan State Spartan. He's still in the NFL. He was with the Cincinnati Bengals for a long time, I believe, with the Cardinals last time I checked. And then there was guys like Mossy Tutupu, a special teams player for the Patriots, a couple others. So there's been a lot of successful Polynesian players in the NFL that have reached that, which is interesting. It makes for a very good documentary. And Sewell's father was a football coach growing up, and I know he had that big necklace that had like the Lions logo in the back with the. Or I'm sorry, it was not the Lions logo. It was the Samoan flag, and he was wearing that on draft day. I thought that was a really nice tribute to Samoa. But a lot of interesting football. So if anybody wants to check out anything with American Samoa in football, it's something actually really interesting to check out. That's for sure. But we mentioned a couple weeks ago, I mean, Sewell's a very ferocious player. This is a guy that can really be a cornerstone on the offensive line. I mean, right now he is slated to be the starting right tackle. We talked about his versatility because a lot of his success in college was at the left tackle spot, but The Lions are already locked up with Taylor Decker. I mean, he already signed a long-term deal with the Lions. But Sewell is going to really bolster that right side of the offensive line, and he's been training at the right side as well. So, I mean, I hope this isn't a huge transition for him. I hope he can kind of seamlessly take the reins, because this is a guy that really has Pro Bowl potential. I mean, this kind of guy is, some scouts say he's a generational player. So I'm excited, and of course, this pick is very Dan Campbell-esque, and same with Brad Holmes, because this is this is a culture guy, and they even said it when they called him. He says, "You're going to be this culture guy that's going to help." And what do successful teams do? They build up front. They build up front. What do the Lions do with their first pick? And I mean, really, their first 3 picks. They built up front. That's what I think is different now. They're seeing the trenches. They're building up front with the trenches. They're trying to build from the inside out, not the outside in, like some Lions teams have done in the past. I like it. I really do. I think Sewell will be a great fit here and a great culture builder. I really do. I really, really do. All right, so the second round pick for the Lions, and there's a couple of these names. It was really hard to pronounce, but Levi Onwuzurike, defensive tackle from Washington. And I thought this was interesting. You know, it kind of caught me by surprise a little bit. A lot of people had him as the second best defensive tackle in the draft, but we talked about defensive players, not a lot of real game changers in this one. And I'm not going to lie, this guy really isn't much of a game changer. He's more of a disruptor. He causes disruption very, very consistently, which is very good, which is a very, very good trait, of course. Very nice first step as well, but he really struggles to finish the rushes. Which meaning, he hasn't had many sacks. I mean, I think he had 2 or 3 sacks this last season only. But he's at least in the backfield causing disruption. Can this be something that can be fixed at the NFL level with technique? Maybe. I mean, personally, I think it's a good pick. Some scouts really say, you know, he's a solid run defender, which we need for sure. But he's just one of those guys that will probably just be good, but not very dominant. But this could be a case where it could come down to coaching and technique. I don't mind this pick at all. And like we mentioned earlier, they're trying to build from the inside out. This is going to give us more options at defensive tackle because, as we all know, the Lions are very thin at that. Not very dominant. They have not really been the same up front since Ndamukong Suh left. I mean, they haven't had that wrecker on the defensive line. You know, I know Romeo Okwara's out there on the defensive end, Trey Flowers as well. But this is a guy, I mean, that can really, really hopefully cause enough disruption, and with some technique, maybe can start finishing those rushes and become a real havoc man, I guess, if you want to call it that, a havoc man. So the third round pick, one of them, Aleem McNeil, another defensive tackle, this time from the ACC, from NC State. This guy's very athletic. He actually played running back in high school. So if you're playing running back in high school and you become a defensive tackle, this guy's 6'2", 317. You know you're athletic. I mean, with that swift feet and all that, playing running back just a few years ago, and become defensive tackle. That's at least good to see. Very good to see the athleticism there. He also played baseball. I think I watched the draft on Friday, and they had some baseball videos. He was hitting some dingers in high school. Hey, maybe he can bat for the Tigers. I mean, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother podcast right there about the Tigers and how that's kind of fallen down. But I mean, hey, he's first and foremost, he's got to help the Lions. He's listed at 6'2", 317. This is a guy that can really control the line of scrimmage. He can really stuff the run. He can penetrate. I don't mind this pick at all. Spending a third rounder on a position of great need for the Lions, and a real athletic guy. Am I expecting him to be, a guy that can really, really, get a lot of sacks and this? I mean, that'd be great, of course. Am I expecting that out of him? No. But a guy that can be a disruptor, stuff that run, penetration, I don't mind. I like it. Like I said, I didn't really have anything wrong with this draft. I mean, not too many questionable guys. We'll continue. Ifitu Melifonwu, another fun name right there, cornerback from Syracuse. This guy, I mean, when I saw this guy, first thing I said was, oh my gosh, is he big? You don't see too many big corners. 6'3", 204 pounds. I like that, though. I like big corners because there's too many guys out there who I feel, especially in today's NFL where you're getting bigger, faster, and stronger by the year, each year. And there's little 5'10", 5'11" corners covering these 6'5", 6'6" Calvin Johnsons or DK Metcalfs of the world. I mean, these guys are no match for these guys. At least you have a long, tall, rangy cornerback, 6'3", that can maybe keep up with these guys. These tall, speedy wide receivers. I like it. Brother, he's also the brother of Obi Melifonwu. He was a second-round pick in 2017 from the then Oakland Raiders. He kind of fizzled out of the NFL, though. But this is a guy, as Brad Holmes said, he has a lot of ability to play in off coverage and maneuver. He's showing a lot of quickness in the short area. What was the problem with Lions cornerbacks the last few years? Anybody know? Oh, that's right. They couldn't cover anybody. This is a guy that can actually cover somebody, at least seemingly. The Lions need all the help they can get in the defensive backfield, especially at the cornerback position. Amani Oruwariye, he's flashed some potential. I think it's a little too early for Okudah. I think Okudah could be a really good player. The scheme last year, I think part of it was the scheme. I think this year's scheme, at least on paper, will be better. I think these defensive coaches actually know what they're doing, at least as of now. I'm curious to see where he's going to fit. Is he going to end up starting? By week 17 next year, or this season, is he going to be starting? That's going to be an interesting question. I mean, as of now, the nickel cornerback's going to probably be Corn Elder. Got him from Carolina. Going to be interesting. I really think that this is a player that really has a lot of potential, and especially that quickness in the short area. I mean, Lions were getting burned a lot in the short area. They were getting burned a lot downfield. It's a guy that can play man and zone. The Lions played a lot of man the last few years. Being able to play zone as well, very key. And I don't mind this pick at all either. I like going defense, and I like at least grabbing a guy that many thought was a steal at cornerback. That is for sure. All right, last couple picks for you. This is a guy that I actually have a lot of high hopes for. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver from USC. By the way, when I first heard that name, my first impression was, I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, A Night at the Museum, but the Egyptian pharaoh in that movie was Amun-Ra. That was literally the first thing I thought of, Amun-Ra, that name. So a lot of interesting names that Dan Campbell picked. I mean, Aleem, Anwuzurike, Melifonwu, Amun-Ra. Interesting for sure. So he is the brother of Equanimeous St. Brown, the Packers wide receiver. And this is a guy that had a lot of production in college at 6'6'1". I mean, not a very, very big wide receiver, but a guy that could be really good in the slot. What do the Lions need? Receivers, especially a slot receiver. Danny Amendola's probably gone. Quintez Cephas, we don't know about yet. Lions could get some good value here. Which, this is also another pick that proves you don't need to have a first-round pick to get a receiver. You can get... Receivers kind of can be a dime a dozen some years. They can be found in the 4th, 5th round. Gems. Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I said, good in the slot. Very competitive as well as what I've been reading. A guy that will win those 50-50 balls. Very tough, too. What this receiver, even on the outside... These picks are very Dan Campbell-like. Competitive, tough, nasty, aggressive. Amon-Ra St. Brown seems to fit that mold. Very good at creating separation as well, which is very key, especially for an NFL receiver. Can win those 50-50 balls. in today's NFL, you're going to have to win that. Defenders are peskier than ever. You're going to have to win those balls, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and get separation, create all that separation that's needed. And Amon-Ra St. Brown could be that guy. Could be a guy that is going to be mixed into the rotation. I mean, because as of now, it's really the starting receivers are Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, and Khalif Raymond. Folks, I don't know. I don't think that's going to get it done. They're going to have to have some more production than that. And I'm not saying all these guys are bad. I think some of these picks were good. Perriman, I mean, he's kind of fizzled out a little bit, but he showed some signs. Tyrell Williams, he's had a little bit of production over the years. Cephas, I would love to see. I mean, Cephas is kind of the team veteran in that group now. It's going to be interesting, especially how they're going to work Cephas and St. Brown in. More of those questions, of course, will probably be answered once we get closer to training camp. All right, last two picks, Derek Barnes and Jamar Jefferson. I want to first start with Derek Barnes, the fourth-round pick, the linebacker out of Purdue. Another guy that really reeks of Dan Campbell and Chris Spielman and Brad Holmes, relentless. And that's the one word I saw a lot when I was reading about him, relentless after the tackle. He never stops. This is a guy that his motor is running 24/7. A guy that could really, really be a great culture fit. And he even has a lion's tattoo. How about that? A big lion. I think it was on his bicep or his chest or something like that. Lion's tattoo. He's got lion's blood already in him. He's already bleeding the Honolulu blue and silver. But a very good career at Purdue. A tackling machine for sure. The one knock on him, though, and he's great against the run. That's one of his strengths. The knock on him, very, very similar knock on Jared Davis, is that he can't cover. He wasn't really asked to cover much at Purdue either. He was either stuffing the run as a linebacker or rushing the passer, putting his hand in the ground as a defensive end. So Derek Barnes, not really asked to cover much. Now, will he work out at linebacker? I don't know. Especially because he hasn't been asked to cover. I mean, he said he's willing to learn, of course. I mean, that's great. Great to say as a draft pick. Can he respond, though, is definitely the question. And I will say, if he doesn't make it as a linebacker, this is a guy that has a lot of special teams potential. A couple key special teams players for the Lions leaving in the offseason, like Miles Killebrew. This is a guy that could maybe take that spot. Could be up there a special teams leader like Jalen Reeves-Maybin. A culture guy. Like I say, he's relentless and never stops. To be honest, I predict Derek Barnes more to be a special teams guy unless, if his coverage skills get better, I could see him getting into the Lions rotation. But if not, I mean, this is special teams guy. And I don't mind that. I don't mind. Fourth-round pick. Why not? Cornerstone, I mean, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, I believe, was picked in the fourth round. At least he has some potential at linebacker, that's for sure. All right, so we skip ahead to the seventh round, the last pick for the Lions. Jamar Jefferson, running back from Oregon State. This is a guy that he thought he was going to go in rounds 3 or 4. He said it publicly. 2 picks before the draft ended, the Lions took him. And it's interesting, too, because this guy averaged just over 154 yards from scrimmage a game last season, which was actually 5th in the FBS. So this is a guy that, I'm not going to lie, I don't know a ton about him. I know he was the Pac-12 Rookie of the Year a few years ago. But a guy that has a lot to prove. He said publicly, I have a chip on my shoulder, and I'm going to be ready to go, and I'm going to give the Lions my all. I mean, when you think that, when you're a guy and you think you're going in the 3rd or 4th round, you have something to prove. And you go in the 7th round, you got a lot to prove, and you got a big chip on your shoulder. I think, to be honest, a lot of these guys have chips on their shoulders. A lot of these guys were overlooked. I mean, look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. Very productive receiver at USC, but a guy that fell to the 4th round. Another guy like the Syracuse corner. He's a big, lengthy corner. Had some success in college. Falls. I mean, these are guys with chips on their shoulders. A lot to prove. And I don't like giving draft grades. I don't. Because everybody's unproven as of now. You have to wait till training camp and when the season starts. But, I mean, to be honest, I don't mind this draft class at all. I don't mind these picks. I mean, I wouldn't say that the Lions made some really, really questionable, like Eric Ebron, drafting Eric Ebron in 2014, like that was like out of the blue. Like, a lot of people were questioning that. There was no picks like this. There was none. I mean, the first-round pick, Sewell, has Pro Bowl potential. Right off the bat, they're saying he's a generational lineman. Some of these other guys, some thought might end up late in the first round too. Some of these guys fell because of, injury problems or surprising, whatever. 2020 was a weird year. So I think a lot of these guys have a lot to prove, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see how these guys are going to fit into this One Pride Lions culture. I did want to talk tiny bit about some of the undrafted guys that the Lions signed. Tavante Beckett, let me start at the top. Jonathan Adams, a receiver from Arkansas State. D'Angelo Amos, a safety from Virginia. Tavante Beckett, a linebacker from Marshall. Rakeem Boyd, running back from Arkansas. Jake Hausman, tight end, Ohio State. Drake Jackson, a center from Kentucky. Jerry Jacobs, a corner from Arkansas. Tommy Kramer, guard from Notre Dame. He was an All-American last season. Guy I really liked watching for Notre Dame. Big guy, too. He just had that season-ending knee injury a couple years ago. The knee might be a concern for some teams. Javon McKinney, wide receiver from Notre Dame. Dedrick Mills, running back from Nebraska. By the way, I met somebody at the captain's internship who's a really, really big Nebraska fan, and they were telling me that they think Dedrick Mills could make the Lions team. I don't know if she was joking or if she was serious, but Dedrick Mills, maybe a name to look out for at running back. A.J. Parker, cornerback from Kansas State. Sage Surratt, a receiver from Wake Forest. His brother was picked in the third round, Chaz. And Brock Wright, tight end from Notre Dame. So a couple of Fighting Irish that the Lions selected. So 13 undrafted free agents, 3 wide receivers as well. I wonder if any of those guys will make the team. Remember last season, the undrafted free agent, the big signing for them was Hunter Bryant. And, he struggled with a lot of injuries, and I believe he had one catch, and it was like for 46 yards or something, so something big. But I think he was really the only undrafted free agent that made any sort of significant impact last season, or if any. He barely made any impact. Just recording one catch on the stat sheet. But overall, I like it. I really do. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this team does in minicamp, and then once they get to training camp, and once the regular season starts. May 12th is when we find out the schedule. I mean, we already know who the Lions are playing, but we just don't know when. So I'm excited. And like I said, I am very pleased with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and all them, their first draft. And there's just a lot of excitement, and it feels very different in Detroit. It does. And I know it felt different when Matt Patricia was head coach at the beginning, but this is all positive. I mean, I feel like this is all positive energy. Matt Patricia, I think he brought some fear into some players and some fear into fans. Like, what's going to happen? I'm afraid we're going to fail. And, I mean, we pretty much did. But this is a guy that's very positive, very high energy, and these picks seem to reflect what they want to build. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. But thank you again, folks, for tuning in. I'm really happy I was able to share my draft experience and go to the draft and all that and break down these awesome picks. Make sure to check out the Sports Illustrated Lions page wherever you get your internet from, and John Macaroon does a great job with that. Vito Churko helps out as well. They do some of those videos as well, and it's always fun to watch. And then also the Michigan Podcast, Fan Report, all those podcasts, the wrestling podcast, Doc and Jock, they're really, really good and really fun to listen to. But until next time, next week, we'll break down some more Lions news. Maybe we'll get into some Tigers as well. Trying to work on getting some guests. I'm trying to get the guests back on. We're dying down a little bit here at John Carroll with the sports, so I might have a little bit more time to do some interviews. But it'll be exciting. I'm really looking forward to the future and the summer with the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in to Open Mic Night.